Welcome to Grassroots Racing Show, the show that takes you up close and personal with all the racing action across our state. And now to our hosts.
Welcome to Grassroots Racing. This is a special edition. We're at the Kansas Auto Racing Museum. I'm Doug Thompson.
My name's Roger Thompson. I'm Doug's brother.
And we wanted to share with you the experience of the Auto Racing Museum. The show, Grassroots Racing, is actually filmed in the museum. And Roger, you know, when we built this spot here after we'd finished racing in the NASCAR series, we just took the pit equipment that we had from the blue semi that's out front that's going to be part of a future display, moved the boxes in and all the racing equipment. And I'm always amazed when people come into the museum and they will look at it and they say, are these the gas cans? Are these the fast fill gas cans? And wow, look at the size of the toolboxes. And you know what I've always liked about this is the Kansas connection. These toolboxes here, both of these were built by Alan Combs and Alan Combs Enterprises in Harrington, Kansas. When we took this to NASCAR back in the mid-90s and we were down in Daytona racing with these guys, it was interesting to watch the pros from Charlotte and all those areas come up and they'd say, man, that's a nice toolbox. Where'd you get that? I said, we had it made in Harrington, Kansas. And I saw a lot of them taking photographs of the pit carts because they were duplicating them. They certainly had the capability. They just didn't have the idea for that at the particular time. And you know, when we raced in NASCAR, what we did, we would set up like the televisions are set up there in the computer, and we would have the direct TV signal up there. So we'd pick up the signal from NASCAR, and the crew would be able to watch the race on television, and they would also be able to monitor NASCAR, so they would know if there was a spin out. We kind of take it for granted that when you race on the shorter tracks, why everybody in the pits can see everything there is out there. But at Daytona, it's a 2.5-mile track. And so when a car spins out, the only way the people on the pits know that for the pit crew that something's coming on. Of course, they have the radios now, but they seldom worked at that time. But what would happen is the officials would come by and give the signal that there was a spin out. And that meant, of course, that the yellow would be coming out because the officials knew it beforehand. And then that would signify that there was a good chance cars would be coming down pit row. So what we did here in the museum was when we built this, and you already know the story behind it. I've told it so many times. Maybe the viewer doesn't know it as much, but this was Good Lord's project. We let the Good Lord pick the location and pick every part of it and then build it. He just used our hands to do it, and it's been such a blessing to be able to have the museum for that. One of the things in the museum that we're extremely proud of is the Kansas Racing Products engine. And the Kansas Racing Products engine, when I was racing in the NASCAR Goodies Dash Series, one night I got a call from NASCAR. It was about 11 o'clock at night and at the house, and I thought, when Connie told me, she said, it's NASCAR, somebody from NASCAR, and I thought, oh man, I must have done something really wrong to get a call at 11 at night from NASCAR. But they called and they said, we're running out of the Pontiac Super Duty engine block, and we heard you're doing some work with Ford. And we were doing some work with Joe Fontana with the aluminum block at the time. And I said, yeah, I am. And they said, can you make that Pontiac Super Duty block? If we get you an appointment with GM first thing in the morning, can you get the information and do it? I said, we'll do our best. So the next morning we had a contact with General Motors, and they said, I want you to make that Pontiac Super Duty block. And I said, if you can give me your tooling, that will help me. And they said, we destroyed it. And I said, why would you do that? And they said, well, it doesn't much matter why, we destroyed it. But they did give me the blueprints for it, and so I contacted Paul Vanderley, who was on the original Pontiac team for the Super Duty. And from that, we were able to then take that Pontiac Super Duty block. Matter of fact, a racer from this part of Kansas, his dad was on my crew, Joe Welsh. His son, Jeff Welsh, was an engineering student working on his master's at K-State. And so Jeff was involved in this project, and we put every penny that we could come up with to develop that engine block. Went to Columbus, Indiana, and did the CAD work with Jeff and designed it. And then that's where the block was cast, and now it comes back and it's machined over in Salina. Merle Peck, my machinist, does the block work on it. And then we ship that block all over the world. We've got a lot of them in New Zealand, and as you know from being around when we're making the boxes to send them out, we got them in New Zealand and Australia, and straight out of the box. That was faster than what the version was before. It's like taking the rungs of a ladder, and we've just moved the level up. with that Super Duty as one of those engine blocks, is the world record holder in NHRA, and it's just been a tremendous blessing how well that project is done. And then from that, after the engine block was done, we also designed the crankshaft. And so we make a crankshaft for that inline 4-cylinder that runs the, you can run a Ford, and we sell the Ford version, of course, Ford SVO. We make the Chevy version for General Motors that can run any small block Chevy head, or of course you can run the Pontiac head on it, and you can get our crankshaft on it, and you can get an intake manifold for that application with that cylinder head. We may even try that project. Maybe see if we'll have Mark Brown might make one of those that we can put in that Belleville Motorsports project car. That would be fun, and on the right track at the right time, you would be able to be competitive if you were on a dry slick track, I do believe. Welcome back to Grassroots Racing. We worked our way a little bit deeper into the museum, and Roger, one of the kiosks we went by is one that certainly was important to us because it's the Plaza Speedway. The original Plaza Speedway was built up above Jay Hill at Junction City. We lived about a mile down the road from there. We used to go on up to the racetrack. You remember, I think we started going when we were maybe, I don't know, 9, somewhere along in that area. 9, when I was 9 or 10, you were a couple years older, but we started going to the races and we were absolutely hooked on it. And of course, you know the rest of the story. We can go ahead and share it because the statute of limitations has ran on us, but we used to get the old hoodoo out, which was a frame with an engine on it and a seat that people held on to, and the two of us after work when on the farm would take that and run that 10-mile section. And to this day I can still see the neighbors pulled over to the side of the road while we went by, and we'd just wave and they'd wave at us. We thought it was just fine, but the neighbors later would say, "Those two crazy Thompson brothers come by 100 miles an hour, thought nothing of it, didn't have any helmets, had no seat belts, no eye protection, nothing."
I might point out that body on that car was held on with 4 bolts, and I don't know what all of the consternation was about. We were 2 very mature 9-year-olds.
Yeah, every bit of it.
And could handle the gravel roads without a problem.
Yeah, and when we weren't on that, we were on the bicycles, riding on the gravel roads racing. But just to see those pictures, but we have the original pictures of the racetrack under construction. I think it was 1956, and then we have in 1957 aerial photographs of that track. And what a piece of history to be able to have aerial photographs. And that track was it was one that was just fantastic from the standpoint that we grew up watching the local heroes. And that's part of what Grassroots Racing Show is about now, that we want to be able to have a situation where kids that were little kids just like we were at one time can grow up and have that respect and that love for the sport of racing and the industry of automobile racing. Just delighted to be able to do it. Well, we've come on a little bit deeper into the museum. This is a car that's very special. You drove this one a lot in your sprint car career. Tell us about it.
Actually, I drove about 4 cars like this. This is the last Laverne Nance built sprint car, and what makes it so unique is that it's a coilover car all the way around instead of torsion bars. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it doesn't make much difference other than this car was absolutely out of control most of the time. If the racetrack was as smooth as this concrete floor, these type cars were just unbeatable. But if you had to run over a pebble or a cushion on the racetrack, this car became airborne. And the pictures that you see on the back wall of the museum are actual photographs that were projected up there, and the artist drew in those pictures. That's what this car looked like most of the time. An incredible builder. Laverne Nance was and is right now in the Sprint Car Hall of Fame. He is to open wheel racing what Thomas Edison was to the light bulb. An incredible craftsman.
Yeah, his cars won features. Sammy Swindell won the World of Outlaw in, I think it was 1981, driving a house car that Nance built. An excellent reputation for car. But you're right, I always enjoyed watching you race, except in this car because of that coil over. My hands were constantly on my head. Every time was just, that car was out of control. I was so happy when we said, let's just park that, put that in the museum because that's where it belongs. And good cars, just not for the type of tracks that we see at dirt track racing in Kansas.
I'll just tell you what Laverne used to say when we'd come in and one of these cars would be destroyed. Laverne would say, "I learned a lot from that run, Roger. let's get another car and try it again. I said, Laverne, if you had the view I had, which was mostly stars at the nighttime races, you wouldn't be thinking that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. But I think you had better luck with this little mini stock behind us, the number 5 car. You won a lot of races with that car, and it was the first of its kind, as I recall.
Yeah, and you remember how it came about. We were working on, my crew and I were working at the shop on the late model car, and you were racing sprint cars at the time. You came back to the shop and said, guess what, guys? I went to that foreclosure sale and we bought a racetrack. And that was, at that time, was I think maybe Flint Hills Speedway. Later, that's the one that became Whiskey Lake Raceway. And why would you want to buy the racetrack? But we had it. So we went out there. Neither of us were racing there at the time, although I won the first late model feature at the track and I won the points title. We sort of stopped racing and went on another direction. But when you bought that track and we got involved in that, I remember going out to the track and we were watching the crowds that were there, and the kids were up in the stand. There just wasn't anybody down there. And I said, why aren't the kids down here racing? No entry-level class. And if you remember, I said, go tell the announcer next week we're going to be out with a brand new class of cars that everybody can afford. And then as soon as that was announced, I said, what's it going to be? And I said, you'll have to come out next week. Had no idea. Went to the salvage yard and I picked out a Vega, a white Vega with a 5-speed aluminum engine in it. Thought this has got to be good. And that's how the mini stock class started. And it took our car count from about 13 at that racetrack, moved on up to about 70, and that series then became the mini stock class and was nationwide. And I remember the first race, it was you, me, and our buddy Don Morse, and the three of us put on a 10-lap race. And when we came across, and it was all even back and forth, good racing. They weren't fast, but they was good racing. And we pulled on into the pits, and we said these cars cost about $50. And the crowd just absolutely loved it. And they said, the announcer said, what are these? What do you call these? And I said, well, these are stock cars. They're small stock cars. They are mini stocks. And that's how the mini stock class started. And from there, why it moved on and is still running mini stock class. We have the distinction of then being able to start the mini stock class and write the rules for them and seeing it become a national class. And I won the nationals in 1992 in that class, in that car, and I won it in 88 in the original one, the sister to that car. Well, I wish we had more time because we've just barely touched the surface here, but stay with us because we're going to work our way back over to the Grassroots Racing set and we'll talk a little bit more about the Racing Museum.
Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Petty of the Grassroots Racing Show. You know, anytime I look to build a new race car, I look for a chassis builder who has his own design, builds a fast and safe race car, and stocks those hard-to-find racing parts. Can answer my chassis setup questions, and is available to repair my race car if need be. Well, Belleville Motorsports meets all my demands with winning race cars, parts, and full service at a fair price. That's Belleville Motorsports for all your racing needs.
Come today and visit the Auto Racing Museum located on Manor Drive in Chapman, Kansas. Bring the whole family and see the first NASCAR trophy and learn about the National Hot Rod Association. So zoom on in.
For more than 40 years, Eagle Communications has been bringing the latest information and entertainment right to your home. Now we've got your local home on the web, myeaglecom.net. This community-driven website is made just for you. Local news, weather, entertainment, events, and classifieds are just the beginning. Coupled with up-to-the-minute national and international happenings, myeaglecom.net is your local home on the web. Make it your homepage today, myeaglecom.net.
It's a beautiful day in our super high-speed internet great customer service neighborhood. Like you, this is where we live. In fact, our company is employee-owned, so it's our goal to improve the quality of life for everyone in our community by delivering faster, more reliable internet, clearer, more feature-laden phone service, and tons of high-definition TV channels, all with a level of customer service and value you'd expect from people who are your neighbors. Eagle Communications, our community connected.
Hi, I'm Pat Neal. Thanks for tuning in to watch this edition of Grassroots Racing.
Welcome back to Grassroots Racing. I'm Doug Thompson with my brother Roger Thompson. Well, Roger, we've made our way back to the front of the museum, just about to finish up the tour, and this is an area where there's just a lot of neat items. Back up here, this is the set we're using for Grassroots Racing Show. I can't believe that this is the 4th show, and we're already into this point for Grassroots Racing. It seems like it's just gone by very quick. But as we made our way back to the front of the museum, you'll see off to my behind me is the this is the NASCAR Goodies Dash car, the 05 car. The last time this one raced, I raced it at Charlotte. Matter of fact, the stripes along the side of it are from some contact at Charlotte. And you know the story about the museum when we came back to finish the racing season. And matter of fact, you were with me when we met over at the shop, and I talked to the crew and I said, next year what we're going to do, guys, instead of going racing as much as we have, we're going to do something different. We're going to build a museum. And the race crew has come in here and built this museum, and families helped with it, and it's been a real blessing. As I look behind me at the museum, you can go back over, there's the 2 little go-karts that we built for Taylor. Taylor was is our daughter. She was a young kid then, and I used to bribe her when we'd come out and we'd paint the walls. I'd say, Taylor, if you're good tonight, we'll put a decal up on the car. And Taylor would help paint because she could get the lower area, and Connie would get the middle, and I'd be up on the ladder on top. Big screen theater back in the back, full screen, and it's hooked up to the satellite, and we also put racing footage on there, and it's really been a blessing.
You know, I look around here and I see all kinds of artifacts that have been added that we just take for granted. You and Connie have obviously done a tremendous amount of work here. I look over here at the chart, and there's the Can We Talk movie that you and Tommy and Taylor made, and what a great film that was. I look around at the chart, the kiosk on the left, and here's pictures that you took when you were racing with the NASCAR guys. You ran the Goodies Dash series with them. I look over here at this tall trophy that was in the movie on the O'Connor Concrete Invitational. It's just, and we're in a very small area of the museum, and we are surrounded with so much information. Back here is the first ever NHRA drag racing trophy that was won by Paul Flynn from Abilene. He was gracious enough to leave that trophy with us. The first ever NASCAR trophy sits over here on the trophy case. That NASCAR race was won by a Kansan from the Wichita area. Jim Roper was a flagman down at 81 Speedway for a while. And that's just in the little area that we're in at the museum right now. Notebooks over here of races for about 10 years that people bring in to us. And I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but you have plans to expand the museum right now, and I don't know how we could get much more information in the area that's available here. It's just amazing what's happened in the period of time. I wanted to point out one other thing when you were talking about the museum being built. We didn't have roads to get up here to this building. We didn't have lights, and we didn't have heat. Bob McCall was instrumental in building some of these walls and the sheetrock. The guys on both of our crews worked feverishly to get this thing together in the shape it is, and it has been a true blessing. It really has.
Yeah, it has. You know, it was. People have asked about the story, and I'm always touched by if either of us happen to be here when visitors come into the museum, and we get about 4,000, 4,500 a year, and they're race fans. And I'm always touched because the good Lord will send people in, get a chance to talk to them, and then I find out their story, and they're usually here for a reason. And people oftentimes ask, how did you do this in the middle of a wheat field in Kansas? Because it was like Roger said, when we started building this, there weren't roads. The mud was so deep that we had to just, it was just miserable weather, and I know the crew was tired, and they thought that I'd lost my mind because all the insulation that's up here, Terry Hurst, who's my semi-driver, since got cancer and died, and him and his wife, Sally, they were part of the racing team, and they're both gone. And the memories that we have here is just, it's absolutely tremendous. And when you think about it, you come up here, and just like Roger said, here's Jim Roper. Jim Roper was from Halstead, Kansas, won the first NASCAR race. I went to Texas and saw Jim at his house, and my son and I went there, did a interview with him. I've got 6 hours of film footage with Jim Roper talking about his racing career. One excellent story after another. And Paul Flynn, the trees, this whole racing complex, because this isn't just the Kansas Auto Racing Museum. This is the Kansas Racing Complex. It's a 15-acre complex. The trees that are built out front or planted out front of the museum go on for, I don't know, what do you suppose, quarter of a mile?
At least a quarter of a mile. And
Paul Flynn planted the trees, and you know the story. I've told people this one before. It's Good Lord's project. Connie and I did not have the money to be able to build this, and the good Lord provided for it. When we got the trees from Paul Flynn, who is the winner of the first NHRA event, and that trophy's over here in the case, like Roger said, but when we got the trees from Paul, Paul said, "I've got the trees, and you got to plant them now." I said, "Paul, it's July in Kansas. What's the chance of those trees growing?" And he said, "Well, Doug, you said this is Good Lord's project. He'll take care of the trees." You're right, Paul. So we planted the trees, and it was one of the wettest years that we ever had for July, and I was more concerned the trees were going to drown rather than die of thirst. And that's just one of the stories. As much memorabilia is in this museum right now, we have at least this much more in storage for the next building, and when the good Lord determines the timing is right for that, then we'll be able to build the museum expansion, and it's just been a blessing. You get people just like you've seen them when they come in here, and they'll say, "Well, what's the story behind that helmet, the Jack Petty helmet and the boots?" And when I tell them and show them the photographs up front, or they see the film footage of the wreck and the fire that happened, it's amazing. They walk out of here and say, "It's amazing. How can a museum in Kansas have all of this?" And we're delighted that the Grassroots Racing Show gives us a chance to showcase that, and all of the sponsors that have come on board have been just tremendous. We've got to go, but hope you've enjoyed this special on the Grassroots Racing Show from the Kansas Auto Racing Museum.